Buddy. Yeah, how's it going? How's it going? Thanks for being here. Thank you, Galen, for doing the marathon back to back. We have a special guest today, besides just Galen and I.
I know. I keep hearing it's so cute in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys probably hear her now. Yeah.
A little less cute.
A little less cute. Hi. Hi, sweetie. This is Baby at Law. Yep. She is our guest today. She's going to talk about
verbal
why to
now.
outsource. Yeah, she is. She's oh, they can't see you. Hold on a second. You're a little bit too short. Yeah. She likes to be in front of the keyboard, but then she's going to start hammering on the keyboard. Yeah, and she sees Galen on the monitor, so that's why she's saying hello. Yeah. All right, Lydia, time for you to go. Say bye. Lydia, say bye. Bye. Yeah. Say bye. Bye. Okay.
We'll work on it. We'll get there.
Yeah, she's streamer in the making. But anyway, the reason we had her there is just because she just woke up from her nap, but also she serves as a very good example of why we are talking about outsourcing today, because outsourcing is probably one of the most important things you can do as a small business owner. Welcome to Your Brand, Your Business. Remember, this is the show where Galen and I and Ernest not here with us today, but the three of us on a rotating schedule talk about the financial, the legal, the business issues that you deal with as content creators, given that you are all small business owners and you're all, for the most part, self-employed individuals as well. That hence the name Your Brand, Your Business. I should add our disclaimer. I don't remember if I added a disclaimer last week, so that may be on me, or the last time I hosted. But the disclaimer is that all of this information is being provided for general informational purposes and educational purposes. Just because we are here and you are in chat does not mean that Galen and I are now your professionally engaged attorney or financial planner, right? So we actually have to sign an engagement letter for that to happen. But we are providing this information so you are all more comfortable talking to professionals like ourselves with the questions that you guys may have regarding whether that's content creation here on Twitch, whether that's being social media influencers on whatever platform it is that you are focusing on, or really any platform that you're doing, because as Galen just explained in the previous show, it's very important to monetize your businesses in as many avenues as possible. That may include creating content on other platforms simultaneously. This topic feeds well into the topic that they just talked about on the stream scene, because to effectively do all of that, you have to be able to effectively delegate and outsource different tasks also. And we are going to talk today about, first, the basics of outsourcing, and then finally, how and when to outsource. And then Galen and I, because as he mentioned previously, we're also in positions where we're hiring and for different administrative positions that are related to content creation, but aren't necessarily being the actual person in front of the camera. So what are some of the qualities that we look for when we ourselves are hiring? And I will tell you right now, everybody wants to be the pretty face in front of the camera, right? Not everyone can be the next.
I gave up on being the pretty face a long time ago. It was obvious. Potentially decades ago that was not my fate.
Oh yeah, I think that's very much why we are the professionals and we're not the actual streamers, right? Because we knew this wasn't selling anything right here, right? So this is my moneymaker's in here, right? And for many of you out there, your moneymaker might not be necessarily your entertainment or anything else, but it's the services you can provide. And if you're looking to get into the content creation sphere or anything else like that, there are ways to do that without having to be the one in front of the camera. In fact, I would say for every person in front of the camera, there should be at least a good 2-3 people behind the camera who are helping them to do the things that they need to do. And that's what we're talking about today from both sides. If you are the streamer, when to outsource, how to outsource. If you are not the streamer, but you want to be in content creation, what are some typical services you can provide as somebody who is getting hired? And also, what are the qualifications that people might be looking at when they're choosing who to hire, right? So, Galen, what do you have to say as far as kind of our intro into today's topic, because this is one that's very near and dear to your heart. I know this is one
Yeah,
that you
yeah, both one that I've talked about before on this show and others in the past, because I think it's really important, and one that, as Joel was saying and I alluded to earlier, is currently hyper relevant to me because it's something that I'm looking to do. So one thing I'll say about outsourcing that refers back to something that Joel just said is there's usually a couple people behind the camera. Think of any stage production or TV production or something like that. Yeah, you've got the people on stage that the audience is watching or in front of the cameras, but you've got not only the crew manning the cameras, you've got people doing lights, people doing hair and makeup, people doing like actual production, sound, scheduling, bringing on guests, so on and so forth. And a lot of those things are, they're maybe not directly analogous to the tasks involved in streaming, but they are things that there are similar roles basically that have to happen for you, especially if you're running a streaming business. And those roles have to be filled whether or not you're doing it or no one's doing it, because it's possible that there is 2 to 3 people behind the cameras work to be done, and you're only doing one of them or 2 of them, and the others kind of go undone. I see that actually kind of often on the like business running and financial side of it. The reason that outsourcing is so important is because as someone who owns a business, which if you're earning money from streaming, that's what you are, there are certain things that earn the most revenue for the business, or are the things that only you can do. Primary one, of course, being the on-camera talent. It's kind of hard to sub in someone else for you on camera. So if you're going to be doing all of the things that go into running a business, including running the financials, making sure the legal stuff is in place, scheduling things out in advance, reaching out, looking for new opportunities, reaching out to them, even just things like managing social media and photos and stuff like that. I say just, but those are big roles. Community management, those are all things that have to happen at some level. And if you're spending all of your time doing those, then you probably aren't being effective on camera, either because you're not spending much time there, or because the time that you're spending there, you're exhausted from doing those other things. And if you aren't spending time on those tasks, that means that you're likely materially hurting your business, because those are things that all go into building you up successfully. A social media presence, huge. Someone doing community management, huge. Someone making sure that you aren't losing 3 or 4 streaming days because it's tax time and you haven't talked to Ernest yet, huge, right? Like those add up, and those are things that you can hopefully give to someone else. So I'm a huge fan of outsourcing. I think it's wildly important, and I think it's underutilized in the streaming space. And I think part of the reason it's underutilized in the streaming space is because so many in the community started out as hobbyists. And when you're a hobbyist, it doesn't make sense to outsource stuff because you're doing it for fun. But if you're running a business and your intention is to earn profit and support yourself, then you do have to actually look at those things.
And I don't even think it has to be necessarily just if you're running a business either, right? Because, and we're going to talk about this later in more detail, but one other key factor of outsourcing is not just that it's, saving you time or anything else like that, but it's also saving you that mental stress and that mental exhaustion, which I'm sure Galen can speak to. But what we're talking about is, and it's topical because the Academy Awards were just a few days ago, or what, a week ago? Yeah, I don't know. I didn't watch them, right? But
I live near LA and I don't watch that stuff.
So either way, like if you take content creation is part of entertainment, right? Content creation, entertainment, it's kind of new media entertainment. But if you look at the traditional models of entertainment, so film and TV, what have you, you don't have Chris Evans both playing Captain America and then also being the grip for the camera or for the boom mics or anything else like that, right? So it just...
He didn't sew his costume either.
He didn't sew his costume either or do his own makeup, right? So the point is that there are many, many different activities and roles and responsibilities involved with putting on a production. Obviously, when you're talking about something like the Avengers, then yeah, that's huge, right? But your
even
own
local theater production.
Yeah, even a local theater production, and to our topic, even your own channel, right? You may not have the multi-billion or not billion, multi-$100 million budget that the Avengers does, but your
If you
production,
do, talk with me.
your production is still a production nonetheless, right? It's just on a different scale. Well, at that scale, you still have activities that you can outsource, right? And just take a look at the people in chat right now. We have moderators here because it's not effective and it's not easy for both Galen and I to speak to the camera, speak to each other, talk about our questions and our speaking points today while moderating chat, while saying hi to everybody else, right? You depend on your regulars to do that. You depend on your moderators and to do that for you in chat, no matter what size you are. In the very beginning, yes, you are probably a one-man, one-woman show because that's out of necessity. But and we're going to talk about this later today, if outsourcing is often a financial question, but it's not solely a financial question because it can also be an investment into your brand and your business. So you may not have the actual operating revenue to support that yet, but that may be an area where you want to invest in it first because you know that that's something that'll provide a return on investment later on, right? So, but before we get into that a little bit deeper, let's talk exactly about what is outsourcing, right? And there is a stigma associated with outsourcing because every time you hear outsourcing, they're always thinking, you took my job, right? Or anything else like that, or you're sending my job overseas. While that might be the stigma there, outsourcing at its core is just hiring somebody else, or not necessarily, and not necessarily somebody else, but sending these responsibilities or these tasks to another location, right? That you're sourcing an external person, individual, program, software, what have you, to do the things that you would normally do otherwise.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at its most basic level, it is software, right? Like I use scheduling software so that I don't have to go back and forth with my clients on what's a time that would work for them, because that scheduling software syncs with my calendar, my work calendar, and shows them open time slots. 10, 15 years ago, that would have been something that either I was having to do or I would hire someone to have to help me with. But now there's technology in place that lets me do it a lot more simply. That is sort of the most basic form of outsourcing. But even then, that kind of outsourcing has let me push off hiring someone for a bit. So it costs me $100 a year instead of $15, $20 an hour.
Yep.
So even if you're, as Joel's saying, even if you're in a position where maybe financially it's not something that you're like looking to hire to do certain things, it is worth the time to do some research on, are there discrete tasks that you can find ways to not have to always do, especially if they're tasks that are either really important, like scheduling clients is with me, or you do all the time, which again, scheduling clients is for me. Finding those high impact areas where maybe there is some software that will do a good enough job. So like I'm still sending someone the link, right? Like, yes, it sits on my site, but the majority of people aren't, when they're scheduling things with me, pulling that link from my site. I'm sending them an email saying, hey, it's time for us to check in, schedule at this link.
Yeah.
I'm still having to do something, but it's less. It's not back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So it's a start.
Exactly, right? So outsourcing is at its core. I like to think of it this way, right? So there's three things that you can gather when you're outsourcing. You're either purchasing time, you're purchasing experience, or you're purchasing some other sort of additional value add, right? So when I say you're purchasing time, everybody has the same 24-hour days, right? So Elon Musk has the same 24-hour days that I do, right? He obviously accomplishes a lot more in those 24 hours than I do, but I'm sure a fair amount of that is also because he's purchasing other people's time. And it sounds very bougie for me to say it like that, but that's essentially what you're doing, right? So I am paying somebody else for that hour, if I am a CEO of a major company, I'm buying however many thousands of people's hours by paying them a salary and having them do that work for me, right? So people think about like, how can those people get so much accomplished in 24 hours when I can only get this much accomplished in 24 hours? They may actually have many people's 24 hours to work with. So it's outsourcing is purchasing someone's time. It's also purchasing someone's experience. I hire a personal trainer to work with me through the workout so that I don't have to go and search the workouts and look up the reasonings for those workouts myself, right? I could do that. I could spend the hours on YouTube, on the internet, or wherever else, learning all of those things, or I could just pay him a very high hourly rate to learn from his experience and his kinesiology degree or his whatever physical therapy training certifications or anything else like that, to buy his experience, so I don't have to actually take that time to go out and get it for myself. So when you're purchasing experience, you're not only purchasing time, but you're also purchasing someone's history and their background, their education, right? So
and I feel like also with that, not only are you purchasing his experience to help you know what workouts to do, like so there's a couple layers of expertise, right? One is knowing what workouts are generally beneficial to humans. The next one is knowing workouts that are generally suited for a man with an office job who's in his mid 30s. And then the level even below that is, how do you then apply those to that person so that they can consistently do it without suffering injury, right? So you may be paying different amounts for those different levels of expertise too if you're looking to outsource, because you can save, buying that experience, you can save at every level, right? And it'll be more expensive to buy it. But like ultimately, if you had all of the money in the world, you would be paying for someone not only to tell you what to do and how you do it, but to walk you through it so that you don't injure yourself, so that you can work out again instead of being injured, right? So I think that's something when you're looking at outsourcing and looking at outsourcing experience, that's really important to consider, is what level of it are you buying and how tuned is it to you, and how willing are you to spend to get it tuned to you. Exactly. Some things where it's very general is fine.
Yeah. Right.
But some things
we'll talk about this later also in like the kind of qualifications that we're looking for the specific postings that we're looking for, right? But then to Galen's point, right, I heard an anecdote the other day, and I don't know if maybe it was Ernest that actually shared it on this one, but it's basically like, so if I'm hiring an engineer to fix a let's just say the water furnace in my house or something like that, right? So he's billing me $200 an hour, right? So and then I'm trying to get an invoice of like, but he's actually only took maybe 5 minutes to just hit the right spot in the water furnace to make it work. So and then I think the anecdote goes that the person was disgruntled about why it cost them $200 for 5 minutes, or when they charged for an hour's worth of work, which was actually only 5 minutes, right? So it was something like, if I was going to itemize that, it's $10 for the 5 minutes that it cost to hit that hammer, right? But then it's $190 for the 20 years of experience that it told me which part of the furnace to hit with the hammer, right? And I definitely butchered that anecdote, but the whole point is that you are paying for the expertise. Different levels of expertise will come with different levels of price, right? But then that's also something that you have to take into consideration when we get into how and when to outsource. But
the one I saw yesterday was you're paying $1 for someone to copy code from Stack Overflow, and $100,000 for the person who knows which code to copy from Stack Overflow.
That's a much better one. That's a much timelier one, right?
Or for streamers, you're paying maybe $1 for someone's time who knows something about, for someone who has done audio stuff in the past, and maybe $200 for the person who knows how to fix your specific audio issue that's been bugging you and bugging chat and driving everyone up a wall, because audio issues are the worst, right?
Exactly, right. And let's put it another way. Like, let's just take Galen for an example. You're paying him his premium rate because he's helping identify your specific financial needs, rather than you paying $20
everything
a year for
I know
Street
you
Journal
could find online after some amount of research, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any like knowledge that is so secret that it's only available to you if you've completed certain blood rights. Like, it's available out there. It's just a question of taking it and synthesizing it in a timely way to your individual case.
Yeah, I mean, same as mine, right? You could do the same exact thing that I could do, right?
Licensure, yeah.
But then
I mean, mine has licensure too, but not like a lawyer.
Yeah, you'd have to go through just that 3 years of schooling plus the however many years or however long to study for the bar exam and pass the bar exam and get licensed for that, right? So either way, it's at the end of the time, purchasing experience is still some sort of purchasing time, right? It just happens to be measured in a lot longer periods of time.
Yep.
And then that's a nice segue into the final value add, in that you're purchasing some sort of additional value, right? So whether that's, for example, when you are outsourcing certain things to certain individuals, that could be a form of liability shield for you, right? So you are, rather than dealing with the art or the design of everything else yourself, you hire an emo artist. You do the smart thing, and this will be a future topic here on Your Brand, Your Business. You did the smart thing, and you got a commercial license agreement signed by that emo artist with indemnification clauses saying that that person did not rip off somebody else's IP, right? You outsource that gig to the emote artist because, one, they're probably better at it than you. Two, they can do it faster than you, and that's based off of their experience as an emote artist and knowing what dimensions work well, what colors work well, everything else. And finally, that's also the liability shield. You had them sign that contract. So let's say they actually did rip off that design from Disney and Disney came knocking. You have that contract to indemnify you from that, right? So if you had done the drawing yourself, then Disney would be coming after you, not the emo artist. There's also, let's say if you had hired Ernest, and I don't mean to, Ernest, if you're in chat, I don't mean to put this on you as if you offer this service, but some CPAs or accountants, they also offer a degree of audit protection when it comes to your actual financial, your return preparation, right? So let's say you do get audited by the IRS based off of your filing return. They are there to help support you and provide those sort of services that you will need, because it's very scary when you are getting audited and you actually need that support. There are all types of reasons that are kind of advantages and benefits to outsourcing that go beyond just purchasing time or experience. And if you can't
insurance, most fundamentally,
insurance,
right?
Yeah. So I not to monopolize the time, but if you can't tell what we're hammering so heavily now, it's that outsourcing is a way for you to do more. There's obviously a cost involved, but think of it as a boost for your brand. Or
outsourcing can also be, if you're in a position where you don't have the funds to outsource, it can also be a service exchange where you're much more efficient at doing something and someone else is much more efficient at doing something else that you need. If they need what you do, the two of you can work together to accomplish more things in less overall time. That's another way to do some outsourcing.
Yeah. Right. So kind of, now that we've hopefully converted you into a believer of the benefits of outsourcing, right? Now that we've proselytized that to the nth degree, what are some types of outsourcing? And we had touched upon this a little bit earlier, but outsourcing can be, it's not just hiring somebody else, right? Outsourcing can be virtual. As Galen mentioned with his calendar software, you actually will see a lot more of virtual outsourcing now, right? So think about it this way. When you actually, when you think about the detail and what the bots are doing for you, having bots in your channel is a form of virtual outsourcing. They are
commands
there to help,
and currency and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. They're there to help drive viewer engagement. You hired the bot to join your channel to help say hello when people follow, right? To put out that little subscriber alert when they resubscribe. You have many people have those alerts on screen, so someone says hello, even if you don't have the opportunity to thank everybody for following or thank everybody for subscribing, that alert is there in the corner to do that for you. That's a form of virtual outsourcing. For professional practices like Galen and myself, they have things like, I don't know if you've ever considered doing one of these, Galen, but like the virtual chat boxes on the websites, right? So you have essentially a digital receptionist for everybody that comes to your website. They have some sort of AI-based, chat conversation where you input some sort of information. They further query about what that information is, and that helps do some form of client intake or potential client intake for the professional. I haven't really seen a whole lot of that kind of done here in content creation, but then you had mentioned extensions in the previous show. Extensions are a great way that people have done virtual outsourcing within the channel, right? Because your channel is here. You have all your panels down here, and your extensions exist down here, and then that's more viewer engagement. That's more, calls to action down there that you can outsource to a software, right? What other kinds of virtual outsourcing can you think of, Galen, or you can kind of move on to the other types of outsourcing that are very prominent.
I mean, like you said, sort of any type of software. So one of the big ones for me is my CRM or client relationship manager software that I can build workflows in, that I can set reminders and stuff like that. That again lets me operate without a human doing a lot of the sort of administrative work that was required to make sure that I actually am providing the services I said I'd provide, and that I am actually remembering, details about my clients and their financial lives and stuff that we've talked about, and that I'm actually following processes in a way that is repeatable, and that I can then analyze. So it's basically, it's basically anything software. And our topic for today of when do I start outsourcing, the things that we've talked about right now are things that you can do right away and that you can build up over time. Like if you're starting with a bot, you can start off with a bot just with its most basic settings, a couple of commands, and the auto moderation to get rid of, links, cap spams, emote spams, that kind of stuff. And then ramp that up to suit your needs as your needs change and grow and stuff like that. So one thing I'd say about outsourcing too is like, it's good to get experience with it early and then tune it to match what you need, as opposed to waiting until you're feeling overwhelmed and then subsequently doing it. I mean, to the conversation that we're going to have later in this, I'm frankly hiring earlier than I absolutely need to. And I'm doing that so that when it comes around, when I am hiring, I'm not then too busy to train the person in what I need, because then I'm not effectively outsourcing. So the sooner you start, the better.
Yeah. And many of the things that we talked about earlier, bots, chat commands, alerts within your overlays, everything else, those are all free, right? So there's no reason for you to not try them at the very beginning. It helps with the production level of your stream. It makes everything look more polished, right? And I can tell you right now, your brand, your business certainly looks a lot more polished now than when Galen and I started it on my channel, thanks to some of the things that Loco had so graciously outsourced to somebody else, right? So getting the overlays done, getting a consistent branding, getting a starting screen, getting a ending screen, all of these things, that all helps with the polish.
We did not make those.
Yeah, we did not make those.
It would not like the mock-ups that I sent to Loco.
It would look like it was written in crayon, right?
Lydia would have done a better job.
She would have, right? So, and this is to say that in the very beginning, there are things that you can outsource with the only commitment or the only expense that you have is time, right? You have to put in the effort to set those up. Outsourcing often, to many people, it seems like a 6 month down the line step or a year down the line step when I hit this revenue goal or whatever, right? What Galen and I are trying to explain is that outsourcing may be a way to help you hit that actual goal. So it may make sense for you to start it earlier. Outsourcing also isn't only just that major commitment down the line where you're hiring somebody. It's also a lot of the things where you are doing one-off engagements or one-off contracts. Like, so everybody hires an emote artist, right? So assuming you're not an actual artist yourself doing the commissions and whatnot. But for those individuals, it's probably something worth outsourcing at the very beginning, or at least once you hit affiliate and actually have emote slots, right? So emotes can be
I'll do that eventually.
Emotes can be, don't follow Galen's example in this situation. Emotes can be a major I'm not going to say it's probable, outsource, right? Well, emotes can be a major audience driver, right? I'm not going to say that it is probable, but it is definitely possible if you look at some of the most well-known emotes out there and people who subscribe solely for emotes, right?
I subscribe to all of my clients, and I have some clients whose emotes I never use, and I'm someone who's at this point fairly prone to using emotes on Discord or on here. And even though I'm sub to them, it's, you know, I realize like, wow, I haven't used one of theirs in forever. And it's just because they aren't great or I don't know the meme behind them or whatever it is. Right. But it makes a difference.
I mean, I can attest right now, right? There are certain Overwatch League emotes that I may or may not have used certain bit amounts just to get, right? So emotes can be a revenue and audience driver, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second part of that is that when you're going beyond just outsourcing software or virtual services and whatnot, what do you, and we talked about emo artists. So emo artists are a form of remote outsourcing in that usually you're not meeting with somebody in a coffee shop in like actual physical proximity. Everything's being done online. Everything's being done over the internet, and you can do a lot of outsourcing remotely, right? And remote outsourcing can be, and I say can be with particular emphasis, it can be cheaper than being, you know, like actually hiring somebody within the same physical space and same geographic space that you're, you know, somebody you're actually handing off work to. So we're kind of going in a certain order here, with virtual outsourcing being potentially the cheapest, and there are always caveats and exceptions to all of these. Then remote outsourcing, then actual like same location, same locale outsourcing, right? And that was kind of like, that is, you may not actually see that happen that often within content creation, right? It can happen, but that will be the final one. Remote outsourcing will probably be the step that most people start and not start.
It's where I'm starting for sure.
Well, I mean, that's where Galen's starting, but that can also be where a lot of people finish. But then sometimes there may actually be, well, let's put it this way, right? It me JP hired people to physically come to his location and build out a studio, right? That's a form of local outsourcing, right? The same with Ninja and his Red Bull studio, right? They hired people to go there and do that. So that is probably like an extreme example of outsourcing. But that's not to say that it's unheard of or out of place within content creation. But remote outsourcing is where we spend most of our time, and I'm going to let Galen speak about this one because he's actually hiring first a remote assistant.
Yep. And I mean, so there's a couple of things that played into that. One of the big reasons that I'm hiring remotely is because I'm already doing client meetings remotely. And so I would be more incentivized to hire someone local if all of my meetings were in person, for instance. But because I meet remotely and this is, you know, my home office here and I work from a co-working space, it frankly doesn't make sense for me to hire locally. It also gives me access to a much bigger potential pool of applicants. There's no reason there are reasons that I want to stay with people who are in the US and sort of in terms of learning about different employment laws and stuff like that. But there's no reason that someone in any part of the country, as long as they had internet access, couldn't do what I'm looking for. So part of the reason that I wanted to go virtual or remote is to get more applicants, possibly. In fact, I think I put in the job listing, even if you are local, you'll probably be working remote, because I don't want to have to provide a physical space for people, because that'll add more cost. It'll add more cost and more liability, actually. And I didn't want either of those. I think another reason to hire remote, frankly, or people who aren't local is, or at least outsource, is if you're doing something that only requires a little bit of work, like, sure, Dan's Gaming Co., they make a new set of emotes for every single game that they play. If you're not doing that because you don't have 15,000 viewers or whatever it is like Co. has, then it can make sense to hire someone who has experience working with a lot of people remotely, as opposed to someone who's just starting out and doing it locally, because then you're drawing on a deeper well of experience. Those would be sort of my biggest reasons. And like I said, for me, also just the concerns about if I'm hiring someone locally, I'm worried about, or, you know, outsourcing to someone local, I'm worried about more potential physical liability issues.
Yeah. And that's part of it, right? So at the end of the day, if you're going to hire someone physically, like Gayla and I both work out of home offices. I'm not really inclined to have somebody come sit in my home office with me every single day and just do the work on the side, right? Especially when I only need them to do however many hours of work a day, right? So either one, you have a office space that you're comfortable having somebody there all the time. And even if I did need somebody full time, I wouldn't want them full time with me in my home, right? Because this is also where my wife and kid are. You need to have that office space, which is an additional expense. If you are a content creator and you're hiring somebody to work with you within the same locale, you need to have that studio or anything else that you're comfortable with having them in that same locale. Those are all added expenses. And then Galen also very wisely brought up the liability issues you have when you're having somebody come to your location, and then let's say they slipped on something while they were at your location. That becomes a potential liability issue that you need actual insurance over, right? So there are a lot of also legal and financial issues that you need to think about when deciding on who to outsource or who to hire for outsourcing or what to do for outsourcing, like virtual services and whatnot. A lot of them may be somewhat obvious, like, it's probably if I have to compensate them for their commute or something like that, or that's kind of have to be built in, or there are things like liability may not be as readily available or evident to many other people, and that those are things that you should also talk to professionals about if you're not comfortable with your own research and Google Foo or anything else like that, right? So, yeah, and if you also don't want to share your address with people on the internet like Tyler,
right?
Yeah, then
like Tyler,
yeah, then you might want to stick with remote. But now if and we'll take questions we'll leave a few minutes for questions at the end. So if you're in chat and then you want to ask us a question, please feel free to go ahead and ask it in the chat box, and we'll try to take note of it and get back to it. But in the meantime, we're going to go on to how and when to outsource, right? So these are how do you make the decision on who to hire? How do you make the decision on what services or what criteria you're going to look at when evaluating services? When should you do that? When does it make the most sense for your business? And actually, why don't we start with the when, then we'll get into the how, because you'll probably be evaluating the when first as part of your overall business.
When plan is before you absolutely need it. Yeah. And that's and I say it that way, which is sort of intentionally not super specific, because depending on what you're looking to outsource, it'll be at different times in your sort of progression in your career or your business or whatever it is. But I would say one of the things I'd say when you're looking to talk about when do you start outsourcing is first put in the work in your business to figure out what kinds of things do you eventually want to outsource, and then try and set up criteria for when it might make sense to do it. Because, for instance, I knew that I didn't always want to. So theoretically, I could run a one-man practice with 75, 100 clients, make a decent income, and work sort of normal hours. But that's not what I'm aiming to do. I'm aiming to grow a bigger business. And frankly, even if I was aiming to work fewer hours, bringing someone in would help with that. But I looked at what are the things that if I were to picture my ideal state in the business, I would be doing as compared to the entire list of things that need to get done to run a financial planning practice. And that insight right there on what I love doing versus what actually needs to happen to make sure this thing runs tells me that I need to outsource administrative. I need to outsource paraplanning, which is the people who do a lot of the specific numbers crunching. I need to outsource compliance because God, do I hate compliance. I need to outsource marketing because frankly, that's not my favorite thing to do. So then now that I know, okay, what are these sort of broad categories or task sets that I need to outsource, my next step was figuring out in what order does it make sense to outsource those, and then what triggers might make sense to start looking to do those kinds of outsourcing with a focus on doing it a bit before it is required. And the reason I say a bit before it's required is the thing that I said earlier. You don't want to be looking to hire someone when you're so busy or overwhelmed that you don't have time to do an effective hiring process. And you don't want to be hiring someone when you don't have time to effectively train them. If
Yeah.
you're bringing in someone to work in your business and you don't have the time to train them, you're increasing your odds that they fail out of your business, essentially. And if they fail out of your business, then you're making your life even harder because now you've invested time and resources into someone who didn't end up working out, and now you need to start over again.
Yeah. So, and I think this is something Galen's always talked about a lot here on Your Brain, Your Business, and that's kind of the effective planning that's required to know where you're going, right? So, step one, as Galen mentioned, is identifying what roles and responsibilities that are involved in the operation of your business. It doesn't have to be daily, but it's overall involved in the operation of your business. Identify which of those roles or duties are ones that can be outsourced. One, it has to be, you have to be able to outsource it, right? You can't outsource someone streaming for you. Well, I mean, you technically could, but right, that's if your community's here for you, they're not going to like it when you outsource it to somebody else.
Right. So you'd have to set up your business so that you could do that. You'd have to set up like a Geek and Sundry, variety show kind of thing.
Yeah. If I'm an avid viewer of Hunter, I'm not going to continue being an avid viewer of Hunter when all of a sudden it's just Galen on camera all the time. Right?
I'm nowhere near as entertaining as Hunter.
Yeah. So that's step one, is being able to identify which duties can be outsourced and how much, which ones you're willing to outsource, and then finally how much you're like, what are the criteria of making that? So if I can use an analogy, it's and not being too late to hire that person the analogy would be kind of like if you're running a marathon, you find out in mile 10 that your shoes have holes in them, right? So that is, you're going to have a really bad time trying to at that point find new shoes or to figure out a way to operate with those holes, right? So even before this step one is a step zero, you have to know what kind of activities are required as part of streaming, right? So, and a lot of people unfortunately do find out the hard way, being able to figure out why I'm getting dropped frames is an essential criteria of knowing how to stream. Being able to operate a software like OBS or Slobs or anything else like that is an essential part of learning how to stream. Those are all duties that you need to figure out first. And then you can identify which ones can be outsourced, which ones cannot be outsourced, and whatnot. That criteria that Galen mentioned earlier is a bit dynamic. Right, so it's not going to be the same for Hunter, for Loco, and for everybody else. Right, it'll be up to you and your personal situation, and also what your kind of goals and objectives are for your business.
Well, and that's why I said I thought about what are the things that I wouldn't want to do in my business. Yeah. And different people will have totally different things. Some people freaking love doing the back end stuff, so they wouldn't outsource that, and they'd outsource my role, which is more the client facing kind of thing. It's fair.
Yeah, it's fair. I'm saying nope in my own personal regard, right?
Oh,
yeah, but and there's also a certain point where you can't just think about what you actually enjoy doing or what you are. You also have to think about what drives. If you're operating this as a business, you have to think about what is the most effective way when it's monetarily about when to outsource, right? For example, I may like doing social media, right? But from a legal practice perspective, it's not smart for me to be spending my time doing social media if I can hire a social media person, because the social media doesn't bring in the money. The actual legal professional services brings in the money, right? So those are different. That's another criteria you kind of have to look at besides just what do you like doing? Are you good at doing it? But also really ultimately, if you want it to be a profitable business, how does that affect your bottom line, right? This is, it's kind of funny. This is a anecdote that my tax law professor had said to me before, right? If we were really smart, we would have figured out a profession where our revenue wasn't based off of our time. Because everybody has the same amount of time. We would have figured out a profession where our revenue was based off something that is readily and easily created, right? So selling French fries, right? What was the thing that you told me the other day? Something about a wise person I can't remember. There's something about like a wise person invented potatoes, and then I forget it.
I don't think that was
I don't
me.
know. Yeah, I forget I brought it up. It was like the wise
Now
person
I'm
invented
hungry. Thanks a
potato chips,
bunch.
right? Yeah. My wife's cooking. I can smell it from the upstairs. Right?
I've had a crock pot going all day because I'm donating blood in an hour and a half. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm going to run and just scarf a bunch of food from the crock pot as soon as we're done so I don't pass out when I'm donating blood.
That is smart, right?
I've done it before, so I learned my lesson.
Yeah. All right. So, like, ultimately, what we're saying is that it's not just a like passion factor; it's also a money factor. How does it affect your bottom line? What the outsourcing does. Ultimately, all right. Like I can tell you right now, it doesn't make much financial sense for you to hire somebody that is more expensive than what it would take for you to do the job yourself, right?
Right.
So, and let's just say that like if it would take me an hour to do one thing and I could do it just as well as it would take person A an hour to do, but person A is charging me more than my hourly rate, it makes more sense for you to do it yourself, even if you hate doing it.
Or, well, at least until you're earning enough that you can afford to.
Yeah, right. Unless you can, until you're earning enough. So, an administrative assistant, right? Part of the reason Galen's probably hiring an administrative assistant is because he makes it's more profitable for him to spend an hour doing the actual financial coaching rather than spending the hour sending out those emails when he can pay the administrative assistant 10% of what his hourly rate is for the actual coaching, right?
Absolutely.
So
although they'll probably be earning as much as I am off the bat, so
right. So those are like, and it's the same for guys like Co, right? To use Co as an example, he makes more in that hour streaming than it would take for him to spend, even if he was like the world's best emote designer and he could change all of his emotes within an hour, right? He pays his emote designer probably very handsomely, but he still makes more in that hour than it would take for that emote designer, the time that it takes the emote designer to redo all his emotes. Right? So there is the cost analysis portion of that, like, and the profit analysis portion of the outsourcing. Those are kind of the things that you have to consider when you're deciding when to outsource.
Yeah. And I mean, one other factor I'm looking at too is just like I guess I'd call like a mental health factor of one of the things this person's going to be doing is taking notes during client meetings, which frees me up to be much more focused in client meetings because I'm not also having to document, which is then more valuable time for the client. But B, then I don't have to spend time after the meeting transcribing my notes into my CRM. And that's something that it's valuable to have those notes in the CRM, and it's valuable to free up my brain time to do something else instead of being like, oh shoot, did I do that? Did I get it all? Because I had my sister was working for me for a couple hours a week while she was looking for a job, and probably one of the things she was doing was taking those notes. And oh my God, was it nice to not have to do that. And now that she found a job and I'm doing the notes again until I hire someone, now every single time I'm writing those notes into the CRM, I'm sitting there like, stupid notes. I have to write into my stupid CRM. I remember when I didn't have to do this. And so it's like actually like a positive mental health thing for me to not have to do it because of me not wanting to do it.
Yeah. And that's another, when you're talking about your cost analysis, your profit analysis, it's not always just dollars and cents, right? It's also how much stress is this saving me? Because at some point, and I think Galen and I are both at that point, the stress saving is worth more than the actual money saving or the money driving.
I mean, one thing I did today is I realized that I was booked, except for 1 hour, I was booked in appointments of various sorts from basically 9 to 5 my time, which that's not, normally I work at least that much, but it's not always appointments kind of stuff. And that had me stressed, like, oh man, that's a lot of stuff to do. And I need to make sure that I time it all well. And, it doesn't give me like downtime to eat and stuff like that. So one of the things that I did is change some of my outsourcing. In that, I mentioned I had that software that does scheduling for me. I already have two things that I do by default on Mondays. One's a study group thing with some other financial planners, and one's this show. I made the decision that I was going to change my outsourcing, and I removed Mondays from my schedulable time with my client scheduling links. And that's going to give me time now at the start of the week to do something that's even more valuable than meeting with clients, surprisingly, which is time at the start of the week to do work on the business, plan out the week, figure out all the tasks that I have, make sure that they're actually sufficient time allotted to do each one. And that way I'll work more effectively throughout the week.
Yeah.
And won't be stressed.
Yeah. Won't be stressed. When you get to, and I'm speaking a little facetiously because I'm older than Galen, but I think significantly older than Galen. But when
I'm 30.
I'll be 35 this year. Yeah. So when you get to our age, the money doesn't matter nearly as much as the stress, right? And then especially when you're getting into my situation, which is when you have a family, right? Because let's face it, like if work is
my wife needs time too, right?
Yeah,
like just
and
because
I find that like and this is a little bit of me being my grumpy old ass self preaching to the youngins, right? But when you get to a certain level, you'll realize that let's call it your mental energy bank or your mental stress bank. Your mental energy or stress bank is a lot less forgiving and is a lot tighter than the actual financial bank or your financial account is sometimes, right? So if it saves me, okay, the guy who I hired to plow my driveway and do all that stuff is not cheap, right? It actually is. I probably could do it myself. Even I have a snow machine anyway. I probably could do it myself. But the reason I hired him to do it is because it saves me that energy, which I rather, and it's not even for investing it back into my business.
And backache.
Yeah, it saves me that energy, that physical exhaustion and backache so that I can spend time with my family. That is so much more valuable to me than any of the other things that you could actually, that are, and it's a key criteria in why I choose to outsource things like that. So outsourcing isn't just in your career or in your profession. It's also something that you do in your personal side, right? So same as like meal planning or cooking, or why do people go out to eat? Because it saves them that cleaning and everything else like that. They can enjoy that stuff with their family members or significant others or whatever. Those are all things that the same criteria, and you don't think about it, but once you put it into these, like this kind of format, what is it that you're outsourcing and what is it you're saving, when you put it into that way, that helps you to understand when you outsource, right? So part of it is financial, part of it is like depends on the state of your business. You have to know what your business actually looks like to be able to effectively analyze the financials. Part of it's also emotional, right? So it's not just your IQ, but it's your EQ. You have to figure out how much is this going to prevent you from getting burned out from streaming or content creation, right? If you are a emo artist and you enjoy drawing, but you hate figuring out the payment and the invoicing and the terms and conditions and whatever have you that comes with doing a commission, how much is it going to save you emotionally and mentally to outsource that kind of stuff so that you can focus on the parts of the job that you actually like, right? So everybody says, if you do what you love, then you'll never work a day in your life. That's not exactly true, right? Because you'll find out eventually that if you do what you love... I love what I do and
I work plenty.
Yeah, if you do what you love, you work plenty, and eventually you're not going to love what you're doing anymore, right? So part of
Unless you're careful about it.
Unless you're careful about it. And being careful about it involves outsourcing and getting rid of the portions that you hate so that you can focus on the portions that you actually enjoy and love, right? So...
And probably each time you outsource, you're actually signing yourself up for short-term more work. It will take me more work to get someone up to speed being my admin over the next probably 2 months than it would for me to just do it myself. But hopefully, theoretically, the idea of why I'm doing this is that after that 2 months, it is saving me time.
Yeah.
But if you don't go into it with those kinds of expectations, you can be pretty ineffective at outsourcing because you aren't planning on how do you actually hand this task off. For some things like software and scheduling, it might be easy. But once you get to the people part of it, I'm anticipating that this is going to be fairly difficult and stressful. Also the hiring process, just because that means like saying no to a bunch of people, which really sucks. Well, no, I don't. Right, I don't like that.
Well, no, I agree. I giggle because I've done it in my capacity for
Yeah.
other, like as a corporate officer for other businesses, right? So it's not something I ever thought I would be doing, but like the first time you fire somebody,
Oh God.
yeah, right. But then like you know what? Everybody hopes that you can get to the point where you can just outsource that to an HR professional,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
then like and before there's different levels of one man show, right? So in the beginning,
Yeah.
your one man show is that you have to do everything yourself. Your second tier one man show is that you have to do the hiring and firing yourself. Then the third tier when you can actually hire somebody to do the hiring and firing, right?
That'd be amazing.
And like so what Hunter's bringing up in chat right now is that like you can love something so much that you just want to do it extremely well. Part of doing it extremely well is knowing how to. And Hunter's a great example of being a content creator who knows how to outsource, right? And knows how to do the planning and scheduling and everything else so that he can do it what he loves as well as possible, right? And that this is a kind of, I'm trying to make this our segue into figuring out how to outsource, right? So the first one is you have to figure out, and Galen mentioned it earlier, what's your objective behind outsourcing? Do you want to save time? Do you want to save money? That's great if you want to, right? So, but then you have to realize part of the process is in the very beginning, you're going to be spending time and spending money. But the payoff is that you're reinvesting that time and money back into your business so that it saves you that in the future, or it either saves you time or helps you earn more money, and ideally both. Right?
Saves me, yeah. I mean, for me, it saves me time so that I can spend more time doing things that earn me more money than that time I'm currently spending is worth.
Yeah, and
essentially.
In Hunter's example, and I hope Hunter's okay with me speaking about it because I'm a little bit familiar with it, with his behind the scenes stuff. He outsources so many tasks and delegates so many things behind because it helps him to elevate the production on his thing. So he hires HB Fox as a broadcast manager to help him to figure out how to make the production, the channel, the broadcast better, how to effectively moderate his community and everybody else. And then he also works with other individuals who help him to keep HB on task and everything else, so that they kind of like, and help everybody be cohesive in the regard that they're all working towards the same goal and working with each other rather than, stepping over each other and effectively being counterproductive. So the underlying tone here is that how to outsource, the first thing you need to do is identify what your objectives are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second, because that'll drive and that'll key into how or what your criteria are going to be for when you're outsourcing, right? So using Galen, or I guess let's just let Galen speak about it. His objectives were saving money, saving time, earning more money, saving time. Right? So how does that
it's not going to be saving money, at least in the short term, to hire someone because I'll.
So how does that translate into the criteria you're looking for when you're hiring an administrative assistant?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I did was put together what was it that those tasks that I was looking to outsource. Note taking, managing the CRM, making sure that, following up with clients, making sure that they schedule, that kind of stuff. And then from there, I thought about what kinds of things or traits help me do those effectively or would help someone else do them more effectively. And then I also thought about what kinds of things do I need from them in terms of work environment. So for the first part of it, I need someone who cares quite a bit about specific details more so than like broad brush future planning. I need someone who is organized so that, because a big part of the job is like organizing and maintaining the CRM, making sure workflows are moving forward, making sure the tasks are assigned out proactively. And then, so that's on like what do I need them to do? And then in terms of thinking about how do I want them to work, it was that piece, like we talked about, of having them work remote, because that just makes much more sense for my business. But then B, since they're going to be on camera during client meetings and presumably at least at some level talking with clients either via email or on those meetings, I need them to have internet and a functioning computer. I need them to have, a setup where they can actually talk and be heard. I need them to have, I go to client meetings wearing, t-shirts and shorts and pajama pants. I sort of don't care about that piece as much, but I need their background to look at least somewhat presentable, right? Um, I also like those sort of those pieces of it matter for how they're working. I also need them to be someone who can write effectively because they're going to have to email clients and do it in a way where if the client says something like, my mom just died and I got an inheritance, I need to schedule a meeting, I need them to do not just send the scheduling link, but to start the email with, I'm so sorry to hear that, or something along those lines, right? Like have this sort of human sense of how do you communicate, because a big part of their job is going to be communication. So I had to write all those up into a thing, and now I'm going to have to interview and hope that I can suss that out in various ways, which is going to be interesting.
So Galen, as I'm sure you're all aware, is an exceptional planner, right? So he did it up by actually drafting up a posting, right? So the responsibilities, what the requirements are, what we're looking for, that kind of thing. I'm not saying that every single content creator needs to go out and do that. You probably hear screaming in the background.
Someone's murdering your child, Joel.
She's just super excited, right? So she's actually a really happy baby all the time, right? So, but if I was going to outsource something like babysitting, right? I may not actually post all of those things and come up with an actual job posting, but at the end of I still have to, at the very least, know what kind of criteria I'm looking at, list that out. So even if it's my own internal note taking, I have to be able to then weigh the candidates against my internal criteria. It's the same for a streamer. So if you're looking for an emo artist, what do? You go look at their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
You know what type of style of an emote you're looking for. You go look at the portfolio, and then even if you're just doing it mentally, you're still weighing that potential style, that style that you envision against their commission portfolio, and then see how closely it matches up. If I'm looking for a super anime style emote, I'm not going to be going to a emote artist who does things very, not anime style, right? So that's I didn't know what the opposite of that would be, right?
Darkest Dungeons, Darkest Dungeon-esque emotes.
Yeah, right. So then at the same way, like those are the criteria that you have to make. So that's a very simplified version of it. If you're looking for a video editor, what do? You have a same style that you have in mind, and then you figure out, you look at someone's reel, you look at someone's demo, their YouTube or whatever, and you figure out how closely does that style match up with yours. If you're looking for, just straight funny compilations all the time, you're not going to go to somebody who's doing drama videos or drama vlogs all the time and hire that person, right? So part of that is knowing your criteria. The best practice would be writing it down like Galen, not necessarily going to the step where you're actually creating a job posting, but writing down what your criteria are so that you remember how to evaluate them. Maybe come up with a scorecard so you can, for each different candidate that you have, you can rank them and evaluate them, and then that way it's easier to help you recollect when it comes to actually comparing them side by side. Let's take the flip side of that. If you're someone looking to get into streaming, but not as a streamer, as somebody who helps, whether that's community moderation, whether that's video editing or emote design or anything else like that, broadcast management, think about what kind of criteria those people would be looking for. If I want to be a video editor, then one thing that you should know right away is I should have a reel. I should have demos. I should have examples of my work to showcase what my skills are. If I know they're looking for a comedic type of funny compilation type of editor, then let me show you some clips that I've put together that showcase my sense of humor, right? If I'm looking for dramatic stuff, then let me put together a demo that shows me with expert edits back and forth to heighten the tension or the whatever that's happening in the clip. These are all different ways to kind of, when you're thinking about getting into that industry, know how to showcase what talents you have and apply them to what you think the potential job posting would be, even if there isn't a job posting available. For a lot of people, let's just say this is kind of your first foray into the content creation industry. Well, you can draw on previous work experience, previous educational experience, or volunteer experience to showcase what it is that you do. Let's say you've only ever worked within a supermarket, right? You were bagging groceries and stocking shelves at age 13. Well, part of that is you still had to have some sort of sense of customer service. At the end of the day, streamers and their viewers are not that different from a shopper and customer within a grocery store, right? So they are different, but at the end of the day, like the thing is that you are still there for the personal interaction. You want to make sure that viewer feels valued the same way that you want a customer to feel valued. You want them to feel comfortable in that space in the same way that you want them to feel comfortable in that channel. Those are all examples that you can use to showcase your, humanity, your customer service experience, all that kind of thing. It's the same as what Galen was talking about. Even if he's looking for an administrative assistant within the financial planning sphere, if I don't have any background in the financial planning sphere, but I'm able to I was a manager at a Starbucks. I'm really good at taking notes during meetings within those Starbucks or knowing how to be professional within that Starbucks. That still helps. That still translates.
I'm having to pick what I am assuming that there will be some at least basic level of skill set that I have to train for, and so I'm picking which ones do I want to train for. Do I want to train someone who knows financial services about Twitch, or do I want to train someone who knows Twitch about how to do note taking for financial services? Because my guess is if I don't talk with someone at all before they start taking notes for me during a client meeting, I will talk about things that they might not know. They might not know what a Roth IRA is, so that might not make it into their notes effectively, or might not be highlighted in the way that I want. So that's a piece of it too, is like knowing where you're likely to have to train. Maybe you'll find an ideal candidate who has it all, but
I mean,
not, how do you work towards that?
One, either it's very difficult to find the ideal candidate, or two, you're going to have to pay the ideal rate for the ideal candidate.
True.
Right?
That's very fair.
That's the flip side of when you're now going back to being the person who's doing the outsourcing. There will be training involved. Right? Mm-hmm. No question about it. Even if it's the ideal candidate, at the very least, you have to train them into, this is my channel name, right? These are my regulars. These are whatever. There will be training involved. Galen brought up a very good point, is that figure out what training you're comfortable doing and you're capable of doing. Figure out what training you absolutely cannot do, right? So I'm sure part of Galen's hiring process is it's hard to train someone how to be social or personable. He's probably not going to go out and make the effort of finding somebody and then training them to be personable. He's just going to hire a personable person and then train them on Twitch lingo or financial planning lingo
for this role. But when I eventually hire a paraplanner whose job is going to be back office numbers work, like they need to be able to interact with other humans in the sense of working with the team, but they're also not probably going to be like leading client meetings or something like that. So in that case, it would be a different set of considerations.
Yeah. So every single time you outsource something, it'll be, and you're looking for something to fill that need or a solution for that particular area, it's going to be different, right? So the criteria are always changing. So you can't have, and even if it's the same position, if Galen and I are both hiring an administrative assistant, we're still going to have different criteria.
Yeah.
Right. So it's still going to be different about the people that we're looking for. He may be comfortable training somebody to get up to speed in the financial area. I may not want to go through that effort to train them in the legal area. And so I'm looking for someone with law firm experience. Right.
Yep. Or like you said, or maybe you just are willing to pay more for someone who already has both, right? Like that's also a consideration, is you might not be able to hire the person who has all of those qualifications today, but you might be able to hire someone who has some of them, and in the future, when you have more revenue, when you're hiring for your next role, actually have the revenue to hire someone who meets all of your criteria.
Yeah.
Comes over time.
Yeah. I think we're getting to that point.
I would say I need to tap out soon so that I can eat, so that I don't faint when I donate blood.
So I don't know if I saw any questions. I'm glad thank you, Hunter. I'm glad that you felt that today's show is very valuable. We're trying to make it so, and really, that's kind of my own that's the most important feedback for me, because to me, like I said earlier, Hunter is one of the people I think more content creators need to emulate when it comes to outsourcing. So if Hunter felt that this advice is applicable, then that means that we're on the mark to some degree. Right. So
at least somewhat.
Yeah. So if there are any questions within chat, please feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started with our wrap up. This will be clipped and available in some degree or another, right? So
on the YouTube channel, Streamersquare YouTube
channel, or as the past broadcast here on Streamersquare. Again, thank you to Hunter and Loco for being here and in chat, and also providing this channel for us to host Your Brand, Your Business on. Again, the goal here of Your Brand, Your Business is ultimately to help you address the business and legal issues when it comes to running your own business, which you're, as a streamer, doing this for a living. It is a business. You have a brand, right? So learn how to run it. Streamersquare ultimately is for that. It's a resource for all types of streamers to learn more about the different aspects. We are business and legal focused. The stream scene, the stream doctor, that's more kind of the operational focus. But then that's also a great way to figure out what criteria, what roles, and what responsibilities go into running a stream that you may not have been aware of before. There was a comment in chat earlier about like, and you can plan as much as you want, but then at some point it is going to be, before you actually try to do it, that's when you figure out what it is that you don't know, right? So it wasn't Galen and I aren't streamers. We do this to a certain degree also because we want to figure out what is involved with streaming so that we can better communicate with our clients, right? So, and I'm sure Galen can very well attest now to being very familiar with all the technical issues that comes to when streaming and all of that stuff, so that
sign me up to never stream again if I can manage it.
Right. So we only figured that out by actually doing it. So really plan as much as you can. If you're great, then you plan as much as Galen, but then some of it is that you just have to try to execute, figure out where things fall apart, where the weaknesses are. From there, outsource them, right? So Galen, where can the wonderful people in chat find you?
So there are a couple places. My business is Buff Your Finances, and so you can find me at buffyourfinances.com. One of the articles that I linked to answer the tax question is, they have been holding on to that question for hours. You can also find me at pajamapantsfinance.com. I blog there somewhat frequently about business and finance topics for streamers. And then there you go. My Twitter just came up in the chat, Galen HDEC. I am on there probably more frequently than is good for business.
Yeah. And because I did receive this question on social media also, and to kind of, I'm going to butcher this name, Anglicet's question. We had previously on Your Brain, Your Business, we also worked on a tax calculator spreadsheet. That's still a work in progress. It's taken me a little bit longer than I had hoped to kind of get that finished. But that is I would suggest for using, you could use that for financial tracking for tax purposes. If you're talking about like the Medium article that Ernest put out regarding accurate 1099s or whatnot, Galen has an excellent tool for that. Feel free to follow up with us, either one of us individually, within the social media right there, or we also have a Discord. Please do go ahead and join that Streamersquare Discord. There is a specific channel for Your Brand, Your Business. You can always ask us questions there. Excuse me. Feel free to tag us, and we'll do our best to answer them there. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you especially to Galen for doing 2 shows back to back to each other. Go get something to eat so you don't pass out again when you're giving blood. But yeah, thank you everybody.
Trust me, I do not want to repeat that experience. It was miserable.
I can imagine. Thank you again for everyone for being here. What do we have? Do we have a show next week?
We do, and I don't remember what it is right now.
Okay,
because my brain is kind of fried, but we do.
We do. So just stay tuned for next week, where we have
we will post about it.
Another yet to be announced, but will be just as equally awesome topic for Your Brand, Your Business. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.